Everyone, I am Chase. I'm the sales lead for Dataedo. And along with me today is our CEO, cartoonist, the founder. He's a little bit of everything, but Piotr, he's going to be able to walk us through the presentation today and lead you guys. Really different agenda today as we kind of cover the success with Dataedo and what that looks like and how to use that through the data documentation. The first, he's going to head into the entire process through and through. So the installation and setup, and then getting the information about the data, where to get that, and then the proof of concept, so what it looks like to really dive into that, and then to manage the documentation and then what that project can look like. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Go ahead and ask your questions throughout. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, there's a questions tab at the top, so just select that, and anything that pops into your head, go ahead and jot it down. We're going to answer the questions at the end. We will have, I believe, one question throughout the webinar, and just go ahead and drop the answers to that in the chat. And if you need anything through the chat, Piotr will not be able to address it, but I'll be able to keep an eye on it. So if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can do so in the chat. Again, at the very end, we will offer the one-on-one consultation. So if you want to take that time with us just to cover your specific case and needs and your specific success with Dataedo, we're always open to that. We have fantastic experts who are very knowledgeable in the product and happy to help you get set up, make sure that you're using it in the correct way, and to share a few tips. So we will offer that at the end, and I can reach out and follow up and set up a time with you. So just let us know on that. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Piotr, and we'll get it started.
Thanks, Chase. Okay, let's get started then. Okay, so the first thing I would like to share are the few tips on the setup of the environment. I have three basic tips. I would really like you to make sure you get it right. So the first thing, we encourage people to use file repository, which is fine for just initial working with Dataedo. However, we really advise using the SQL Server version of that. So if you're just testing it and playing with the tool, it's fine to use file. However, really the real product, the real value of teamwork and collaboration comes from the server. And also our new product, which is in beta, closed beta at the moment, which is web version, also runs on the server. Okay, so that's that. Another thing that seems obvious, but it's not. It's often omitted by our customers, is making sure you actually publish and share the documentation. So it's easy to do documentation and keep it for yourself, or maybe show one colleague. However, the real value comes from sharing of the knowledge. I know there are some issues with different environments where it's not easy to actually share the documentation in easily accessible format. We have our main format, which is HTML. You can share it in any web server, so IIS. You can share it on Amazon S3. It's not really feasible to share it on SharePoint, but there are other ways, and this is the really important part. And we also have the new web coming up. It's in closed beta, so if you're interested, let us know. There are a few customers already testing it. That's another way of sharing it. So make sure you install it, create accounts, and provide access to people, because documentation without the people using it, it's not really useful. And the last tip, automate the imports and the publish if you are using HTML. So if you're making changes to your database, I hope you know that there is an option to click a button and import those changes into our repository. Which is not obvious is that you can schedule that step, put it in a Windows scheduler task, make it daily, so your repository is up to date. And you can do the same thing with the sharing of the HTML. So everyone will have access to the most recent documentation, at least the most recent schema. Okay, so these were the 3 tips I have regarding the environment. Now, something a little different that doesn't apply to our tool directly, but I would like to share you a few practical tips that will help you get information about your data. So, you connect to the database using Dataedo and you the schema. If you see the schema, view the schema. However, how would you know which tables hold what data? What are the purpose of columns and what are the foreign keys? So here are a few tips that practical tips that you can use to get this information. So the first thing, which seems obvious, look for any existing documentation, and that can be take 2 forms. One is the vendor documentation. Over here we can see a sample documentation of Oracle application. They have a ERP called Oracle e-business suite, and they have a ton of documentation that describes all the fields and tables. So look for that if this is like a packaged application. Another piece of documentation is something that was created when the system was designed and implemented. This could be out of date. Quite often it's done in those initial stages of the system and never maintained after that. That's very often the case. However, that can be very, very useful source of information. So make sure you dig through everything you can lay your hands on that was related to implementation of the system. There you can really find something valuable over there that you can then copy or type into Dataedo and make sure it's up to date. Another thing, find people who know how it works, and again, it could be sometimes surprising who knows about the structure. So really make a list of people who could that be, and it's better to ask too many people rather than too little, because sometimes there are people in those departments that are actually reporting from the database. They know quite a lot. However, they are not formally involved with anything like that. So this could be people in your data team, but those could be business people in business units as well. You never know who is actually working with the data and has some kind of reports or queries on the side. So talk to data analysts, developers, if there are any developers working currently or maybe in the past, and anyone involved in BI and data warehouse. They probably know a lot about that. And yeah, business users, as I said, you could be surprised that they actually know how know a little bit about the databases. This one is also very useful. I was a data warehouse developer and architect in the past, and I found it very useful to look for views in the database and existing reports, even if they are not used anymore. There's a ton of information, especially about the tables that you are using, that you need, and the joins. So if you look at the code, source code of existing views in your database, you will be able to reverse engineer how the tables are joined together, which is really gold if you want to know how the database works. So check out the views, check out all kinds of queries that are run. Again, it could be some business department. There's a person in HR, for instance, that runs this query every month to take, I don't know, list employees and their salary, right? So it's a really gold source for the information about the tables, columns, joins, and calculations. Look at the tables and check if they have the actual data. So if they have any rows inside. Here's a sample query. You can go to that link where we have a query for different database engines, and that will be a good indicator for you if the table is actually being used. Many databases have hundreds and thousands of tables, and they are often empty. We'd like to add this information, by the way, to Dataedo in the future. So let's say you're looking for customers, right? And you can look for tables that have something, a cast in their name. And by the number of rows, you will be able to see which are the actual candidates of, holding the customers, right? If it has like 10 rows, that's not the table you're looking for, right? Yeah, so you'll have a good feeling if it's the actual table you're looking for. So it's a very simple trick, very simple query, and that gives you a lot of information. Again, we'd like to add that into Dataedo in the future. Talk to developers. They have the code, right? They have the knowledge themselves, but they also have the source code, and that source code can be also very valuable source of information about the purpose of the tables and columns, and which tables and columns are actually in use. So if you have access to the code, go ahead and look into it. You can use search function to find for specific tables, or talk to developers so that they can check that for you. And the last tip, which is actually a joke, you can go to a fortune teller. That's the last point of where you can actually get some information. I'm just joking. Hopefully the points above will give you information about the will help you find the data. Okay, now I'd like to talk about how to actually approach the documentation of your data, and I would like to split it into two parts. So first, proof of concept. So assuming that you would like to have a sign-off on the project, get resources, get budget, get people involved, actually sell the concept in your organization, right? So that people actually would like to help you in the documentation, would like to spend some time, and would actually like to use the documentation when it's created. So I'll give you some few tips I think could be practical. And then the next section I will talk how you can, what you could do to actually, how to organize the project, which is then ongoing documentation, how to approach the larger scope. So let's look at the proof of concept first. Okay, so the main thing I would advise you during proof of concept is to keep it small. Documenting any practical database can be really challenging. As I said, there could be hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of tables. I would not advise you to try to document it in once. It could be impractical, and it could be frustrating, and you could spend too much time before showing any value. So my tip for you is this: choose one domain, one aspect of the data, and that should be something that is actually hot in your organization. So something is talked about, some data that is being analyzed. Let's say, I gave you an example of customer retention. This is something what we looked into recently. Our retention grew, and we would like to learn more about what's the actual value and how much it grew. So if this is something the management is looking into, then you should focus on that and create a module for that. So assuming you already have your repository, create a module. Then well, actually that's the next step. However, just assume that you would like to focus on that, and your proof of concept will focus just on that. Then find the experts. So this could be most likely people who are reporting on this. Those people should be familiar with the data model. So BI developers, data analysts, someone who's, or data architects, someone who's really who would usually go ahead and do such an analytics, such a report. You can also collect the information about this data from the previous section, so with using tips from the previous section. And then hopefully you could get this expert, this domain expert, to have ownership of this module. So that person will be responsible for documenting this module and these data structures that will be part of the subject area. So you identify the scope and you have a person, and now the person should. The first step should be identifying key tables or views, right? So which data would be used for the report, if you know, or which tables are already being used in the reports or queries and analytics. So these tables should be identified and assigned to the module in Dataedo. That way you have a very small piece of your database that is very manageable. I would assume that this should not include more than 15 tables. So somewhere in the range of 5 to 15 tables. If you have much more, I would take something smaller, split this into a smaller piece. Okay, so you have module and you have key tables. Now the expert should document the data structures in that module. So first, describe the tables and their purpose, what they are used for, what data they are holding. For instance, I don't know, customer table holds customers, and then go ahead and document every column of this table. So yeah, I would advise documenting every column, including the obvious ones. Think what's not obvious, because if you have invoice number, for instance, don't just write that invoice number holds in number of the invoice. Think you could provide more details like sample invoice number and how is it calculated, what's the logic, how is it actually, where is it created, and so on. When you have documented tables and their columns, the next step would be the relationships. So make sure you check the columns and see if they are foreign keys. Make sure you define, or the person defines, the foreign keys to the tables which they are pointing to. That way you will know what the tables are for, what the columns are for, and how to join tables, right? That's really important information. So this is where you have majority of this of the documentation of this of those particular tables. And then finally visualize this data model with diagrams. So use module ERD functionality to create a diagram. Now that you have the documentation, so the actual work is done, I expect it should not take more than a day. To document 10 tables, they should be enough, in my opinion. I don't think it should take much more than that. Well, maybe if you're really trying to, you're struggling with getting the information about those tables, it's not easily accessible, and there's no one who knows. It could be maybe more, but I think that's about 1 day is about right. Then you should make sure you actually share this documentation. So the work part is done, and now hopefully you're in the part where you demonstrate the value. So you publish it and you share it and promote it. So by promotion, I mean you make sure that people, that different groups of people actually know about it and are encouraged to look into it. So those would be all those people who are usually working with data. So any in the data team, anyone in the data team. So like data analysts, BI analysts, data engineers, developers, and so on. And also people who usually would not be interested in this kind of documentation. And those are business users. I think it's important to get their support as well. They could enjoy, well, they do not, they're not technical people most likely, and things like foreign keys and primary keys could be a bit confusing. However, just seeing the key entities and their attributes and some description in human language could be very useful, and especially diagrams. So they could enjoy the fact that they become a bit more aware of the data that's stored in your system or data warehouse. And the next part, I think it's also very important, is to get feedback, to ask for feedback. So once you share it, you actually make an effort to get information back about the documentation, and I would do it in the right after they actually familiarized them with the documentation, and waited a couple of weeks. Hopefully during that time, some of those people actually made a use of it. So hopefully at the end of this proof of concept, a couple of weeks, say a month, someone just saw the value and said, listen, now if it was business user said it could be something like, now I understand what data we have. Now I can I could make more educated request about new report or someone on the data team said it was easier to write a report, a query, or they learned something about the source. So getting feedback, in my opinion, is very, very important. You could also make a few. You could repeat the process. So using the feedback, you could improve the documentation, provide more information if it's too if there's missing something useful. And here are a few tips how I think you could demonstrate the value of documentation. So the first idea is to get someone new to actually query the data. So usually you'll have one of your BI developers run the query, and so nothing unusual. But maybe you could share it with someone and encourage someone else who's not typically, for instance, using your data warehouse, to try use the documentation and query the data on their own. That could show that you can scale your team, and you could make non-technical people or less technical people actually use your data. Another thing, you could get feedback about the development time, and that could be from BI people. So you could, the documentation could be used by people who usually would create reports and analytics, and you could ask them if they actually saw any improvement in if the process was streamlined. That's in an ideal scenario, if they're working with the same data and they were the expert, I don't think they will notice anything. So the point above is stronger. Getting new people build queries. You could also ask developers to see if the development and maintenance and adding new functionalities, if that they see any progress in that. Tip number 3, you could share it with business users, and as I said, earlier, maybe they will see the value of having better visibility on the data. So sharing with business users could make an impact. Make sure it's part of the onboarding process of new people. It depends, you would really have to hire someone new to see this value. However, we had feedback that with the documentation, hiring process is so much easier, because it's so much easier to send the link to a new employee, new hire, rather than spend sometimes few days explaining things. So hiring new people and scaling your team is a great way of showing the value, of demonstrating value of documentation, because you make one-time effort and then you can just use it for every new person on the team. And the last tip is make sure to make it part of the change process. By change process, I mean any other new functionalities or any other new changes in existing reports or data warehouse. Hopefully the team will see it as more transparent, more, especially using our schema change tracking functionality. It could be more managed, it could be more controlled by all the parties when you introduce changes to your system. So documentation provides a value here as well. Chase, I think we have a question over here.
Is it coming up?
Is it coming up? Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, it's not.
One more. That's what I thought. I thought it was on the next section.
Yeah. However, yeah. So the question is?
The question is? Yeah. That's on the next section, isn't it?
No, that was here. So we wanted to ask you, how would you demonstrate the value?
Yeah. In your organization, how do you demonstrate the value if you're a current user? And then if you're, looking into Dataedo, how do you see this providing value to your team, to your business throughout? There's so many different opportunities, and I know Richard in the chat has mentioned a few. How do you see this demonstrating value in your organization? And you can just put that right there in the chat.
Yeah, it would be great to learn.
Kind of what you're thinking. It may give other people in the webinar ideas, or just show what you're thinking there. It's good to hear.
You could also let us know over email. We could collect some of the things we learned from the customers, so we can share this knowledge, because I think it's it could be very interesting for all of you. Where does the value? Where is it created? So you could demonstrate it in your organizations and get a sign off on the tool, on the project. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's move on right now to the part where I'll give you a few tips how, assuming the proof of concept went well, you have a sign off, you have a tool. So how to do it so it's efficient. Okay, so I showed you how to create a first module and document first element of the first piece of the database. So now that if you'd like to document the entire ecosystem, I would advise you to split all the entire database into those smaller buckets, which are modules. So identify those modules, then assign tables. I think that's not difficult part at all. And then important part, that this is, I believe it's important, assign owners to each module and sometimes table, depending how deep you want to get into. Sometimes some tables could be used in multiple modules. It depends how you want to structure it. However, we have a field for ownership. You can create your own fields. And I think it's crucial that everyone knows in the team what they are responsible for. So let's say, let's have a look here. Let's say human resources. It has, a few 5 tables, and it should have a field saying that this particular person is responsible for the documentation. if it's something is not clear, this is their responsibility to add this information. I think it's a very simple trick and very powerful one. You could also indicate the status of each object. That's useful for most of the databases out there, because usually you do not, for instance, drop tables or columns. They are just not being used anymore. So just indicate which, if it's this column is being used, table is being used, or if it's deprecated, or if it's planned, or it was planned and never used. That's also very powerful information. And we have a functionality called progress tracking, when you just click the button and it shows you how many descriptions and other fields are populated. So you can use this feature to see what still needs to be done. Right. And you can divide yourself into teams of two in the search of tables, as the guy in the cartoon. Okay, and a few tips on the maintenance of documentation. So yeah, hopefully initially you have documented the database, and to maintain the documentation, make sure you automate those schema updates. It's very simple. You just save, there's a like Dataedo command file which you just save from the software, and then you can put it into Windows scheduler. Use our schema change tracking functionality, which shows you the history of the changes. That way, it's easier to see, incoming new fields and tables. You can see here that something is new and it needs to be described. However, this is a bit more clear, more informative. Track progress, again with this report over here, and automate the generation of HTML. That way, people can have access to the most fresh documentation, or use our new product, which is Dataedo Web, which shows information live from the repository. And also create some kind of formal feedback and change request process. We are in the Dataedo Web. We are planning. We're building this module that will have ability to open threads and comment on data elements. That would be very useful to ask a question about specific elements of the data. So let's say a column, you could ask question or request changes, to the descriptions if they're missing some information. They will have statuses, so open and closed, and you can use that to have a feedback process in place, and actually make sure you collect the knowledge, extract the knowledge over time. So it's not just one-off process. It's like a process of constant improvement. For now, it could be anything like an Excel spreadsheet or email. You could have an inbox that people can email to request this kind of changes. Just make sure it's one process and it's clear for everyone how to use it, and that way your documentation can improve. Okay, we are at the end of the presentation. The timing is
good.
It
looks like we have. Yeah, right on time, and it looks like we have quite a few questions, so I'll go ahead and dive into those. But everyone, as we run through these, we'll have a bit more time just to answer more questions. So if you think of anything, go ahead and add those to the question tab. Axel, looks like he asked, do we share, kick me back up, on our own web servers?
Can we share on our own web servers? I mean, meaning our servers, or?
No, theirs. Yeah, it looks like he's meaning like, can they share on their own web servers?
Currently, this is only hosted in your environments. So you could do it on premises, you could do it in your cloud. We don't host anything. We're planning to help you host the HTML documentation, and in future make it a cloud solution, but it will always be available on premises.
Absolutely. And then the next question is there any option for user access control, like which users can use which model or tables? And Piotr, we've actually spoken about this with a few different clients recently, but yeah. I'll let you go into that a bit deeper.
Yeah, that's a common one. Currently, we don't have any access control. I mean, there's access control to the repository as a whole. This is something we are working on as a part of web product. So it's not available at the moment. It will be in the future. There will be, I don't know exactly how the access will be granted, but I know it will have ownership. So formal, like right now it's a field, but we'll add a owner for every element. Maybe not every, but tables and modules and databases. So we'll have an owner, and that owner will be able to edit things, and you'll be able to define the access and visibility to those fields to other groups of users somehow. I'm not sure about the details, but that's something we need to get done.
Absolutely, yeah. And when again, it's becoming increasingly popular of a question that we've had, so definitely a priority there. Do you have any suggestions for international teams? They suffer a lack of translation possibilities. So I can imagine with international companies that can be an issue. What would you say would be a use case there?
Okay, that question also we've heard that one. What you could do, we have a description field, the default description field. You could create a new custom fields of the type of the text type. Call it description French, description Spanish, and so on. I think that would be a way to go.
Fantastic. And then if there's a foreign key logically in a table, but the constraint is missing, then is it possible to establish the relationship in ERD and Dataedo?
Yes, that's one of the core functionalities of Dataedo, to allow you to create those relationships in repository. So we mix this information from the database and allow you to add this information on top of that just in the repository. This is actually what I talked about. I advise you to do as a part of the proof of concept to show the relationships. So yes.
And then are there samples or helps about automating the different parts of documentation, like how to ...
I'm not sure. Yeah, the automating the documentation. Yeah, so yeah, first of all, you can automate the import of the changes into our repository, into the documentation. So that's a huge help. You can apply changes from the models from the databases easily. What else? You could also, we have a bulk column editor, so you can copy the description, the same description for other columns with the same name. So let's say you have created date in column and you'd like to copy it to all the tables, same description. That's another way. Yeah, that's it what I can see for now.
Okay, great. And then how do you see the connectivity to other elements of project management and application services, like referring to bug tracking, change requests, etc.?
Yeah, I don't see a native link to any of the software. However, if you're using a backtracking, you can use links from Dataedo to in the other software, right? So that's one of the way of integrating it, and you can use ticket numbers from the backtracking project tracking software as a reference number. But that's very, very light integration. I don't, there are no particular integration, modules we have.
And then if I have a comment, or I have comments in my SQL table creation, are they automatically imported in Dataedo during import?
Yes, they are. However, just the first time, because Dataedo is a master data for master source of those descriptions. So if the field is empty, or the first time you import the table, this information gets extracted. However, from now on, it's managed in Dataedo. So if you apply the change, it doesn't get overwritten when you hit a refresh button, so update button. The update button is very safe. The assumption is you do not lose any work you do it in Dataedo.
Great. Yeah, and then Luke just asked, one of the issues they are facing is when they identify the owner, they're not always keeping, or they're not always keen on taking on that responsibility. Does anyone have suggestions on how they may overcome this? So I think this is more of a community question.
Yeah, good question.
Is always good. I know Richard responded to Luke and said that they began with one primary owner for all documentation. And then as people saw the benefit, their willingness to contribute and own models increased. So that's really good feedback there. Piotr, have you seen any other cases that are similar to that, and any advice that you'd have to Luke?
I don't actually. That's a good question, but that's that's a tricky one. I have a cartoon. I can make a joke out of it. I don't. So that's the least I can do. Let me show you what I created when I actually heard that that same question posted on LinkedIn. So this is my answer. If you don't know how to solve something, make fun of it. That's my theory. Yeah, I don't know. A cookie jar. You could start with that. That cannot do any harm, especially actually these days when people are working offline or online, could be tricky.
You can mail them cookies.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and guys, if you haven't already, we have a cartoon section on the website, so definitely check out some of Piotr's cartoons. He does all of them, and again, he has a habit of making light of situations that aren't always fun that you guys deal with daily. So I'm sure that may add a little bit of. So if you get a chance, check those out.
Like this one, when you actually you probably seen it yourself when you were trying to enjoy yourselves on the holiday, right? And you got some phone call. So yeah, we are trying to put some laugh.
It's good to lighten the mood, especially on topics people struggle with fairly frequently. And then so just to go back to one where we were speaking of the translation or working with international teams, they were asking more on the export to HTML of exporting into different languages, which is actually really good. I'm sure that
okay. Let me.
So there's like a /D and /EN.
No, we don't have that. However, if you use those fields, if you use the description field in different language, what you could use is to, at the export time, you can choose which fields you'd like to include in the HTML, right? So at the moment, the core description is always included, but we were planning this update where you actually choose which fields you'd like to, which elements we'd like to export in HTML. So you could make two exports, right? One could be like EN, and the other could be FR or whatever language, and you could just have two exports with different scopes of fields, right? So description French could be in the one and English in the other one. Yeah, that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she said, yeah, but there is this very important description of tables and objects, are which contains a lot of info.
Okay.
And then plus the business clause.
Yeah. So yeah. So you will have this different descriptions for different languages, right? So you'll have. I'm not sure if you know what I mean, and if I know what you mean, but you could. Yeah, if you have a description in different languages, so that would be your description field, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be the core description, our built-in description. You could use other fields for that as well.
Yeah.
On the table level, we do not have a rich text field for the other languages, so additional fields. So that's a limitation. Yeah. However, in the rich text, you could have sections for different languages, also possible.
Yeah, and Richard also added, it's something that I was just thinking of, using the custom columns for the table level also.
Yeah. However, yeah, for short descriptions, it's perfectly fine. If you'd like to attach some graphics tables, that would not be ideal. But again, you can use the main field to build sections, right, for different languages.
Yeah, and then I believe the last question that we have as of now, so last call for questions, everyone, if you have anything, go ahead and throw it in there. Alternatively, we have our emails at the end, so if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out with that. But will there be a possibility to document indexes?
Yes, that's a tough one. We have a forum. It's at support.dataedo.com, and it's a very popular request. And we at some point said, sure, we'd like to do it, but then it turned out, yeah, there's always something where we put more priority. We would like to do it, however, it would require, there's so many things we have on our plate right now, but it's always just below this line, right? We're building our team, so ideally, yes, I would love to have that. However, I cannot give you a date, and I cannot give you even a year.
Yeah, well, and it's good because we have about 1 million other things on the roadmap that we're preparing for you guys. So it's not like we're holding off on anything. And Milan just said the product is great. So, we're happy to hear that. And I know Richard has provided awesome feedback throughout. And guys, if you're watching this back and have any questions or thoughts or concerns similar to what we've had in the chat, again, email Piotr and I, we're happy to feed that. And I believe, Piotr, on the final slide, we have our contact information just to pop back up there.
Okay, sure.
So that you can see that. If you need anything, just let us know. Thoughts, questions, you want to have a one-on-one meeting. Again, our experts are the best, and happy to walk through and tailor your specific needs and goals. So again, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help there. And check out Piotr's cartoons. He works very hard on those, and they're cool to check out.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have anything else to
add? Thanks, Chase. Thanks all for being active, for your questions. I hope you found something useful for you, for your data, and I hope to see you in emails and future webinars.
Yeah, we have a lot of cool webinars coming up, so we'll be reaching out to you all, but keep an eye out for that in your email, and we hope to hear from you guys soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye.